Hello and welcome to the day of connecting with the self. Now we're really starting to get into the juicy stuff. And if there's one thing to take away from this whole course, it would be today. The connection with ourself is one of the most important things for fulfillment, for well-being that I've experienced. So when I talk about the self, I've experienced that there's a deepest aspect of ourselves that is our authentic, true self. It's hard to quantify and describe, but essentially there's this inner stability of truth, of well-being that's infinite in depth. And through meditation is the primary way I've experienced. You can connect with this deepest sense of self and really embody it, and it can become more of who you are. Sometimes I like to think of the self as an external entity in some ways, even though it's not. But imagine it like a pet. Imagine it like a child. Not as though we're superior in any way, but just in the relationship of nurturing and looking after. For example, if you see yourself as one that needs to be treated all the time, given lollies, given infinite treats, then, like if we did that for a child, losing teeth, getting overweight, we've got a chonky dog, yourself might reflect that. On the other hand, if you see that yourself needs to be held with such tight discipline that it cannot be given anything, that it has to follow a regimented plan, it may be that you're lacking a little bit of well-being, and the nurturing aspect of your connection with self might not be in balance. And so there's the two ends of the spectrum. But if you can find a way to balance that, you give yourself a baseline of attention, of care, that's going to create the self that you want, and work out where is the right point of nourishment, of nurturing, where, let's say we've eaten nutritionally from Monday to Saturday, and then on a Saturday night, on a Sunday, we go out for dinner or lunch, and we feel that nourishment that's restoring our well-being because there's flexibility. We're actually nurturing an aspect of ourself, not just the body. If that gets too far out of balance, let's say you're like, yeah, I need to nourish myself, and then every day you're eating a dessert plus extra, then that can easily tip out of what would be optimal for holistic health. So as always, it's about finding that balance that's right for you. For me, probably 6 days a week eating in alignment with what's nutritious and then having a nourishing meal once a week, that's really good for me. Anything more than that, and I'm like, I felt that detriment me and I didn't really need it psychologically or within myself. So we can think of the self like a pet, like a child that we need to nurture and nourish in a healthy way. But then also thinking about the adult self, that it could be like have a relationship with ourself. So imagine you're in a partnership with someone and you come home and you immediately start cooking, you put your headphones in, they're looking for connection and you're completely ignoring them. You go have your meal, watch TV by yourself, and you go straight to bed. How do you think they would be left feeling? Now imagine you're doing that to yourself. Imagine that there's a part of you that's seeking quality time with yourself and you're not creating that space in your own life. There's a part of you that's probably feeling hurt. And then that can further drive us to know that on some level, and then actually feel fearful about what we might have to face when we confront ourselves for how much we've neglected ourselves. So I really think it's important to create space for quality time with yourself. That can be taking moments throughout the day just to sit and just tune into what you're feeling. Because, we can look at meditation for its stress reduction benefits, for its ability to reduce the stream of thought. But I really like looking at it from a perspective of creating space to connect with oneself. And the more that you can do that, the more that you're going to create this connection with self. And ultimately, I think connection with self is about wanting to work with yourself, to knowing what yourself needs, to creating the space to have anything that's within you, a need, etc., to surface, and for your conscious self to go, I recognize what you need, and I'm going to help give you that. Because it's interesting, right? We have our conscious self, that you watching this, and then there's deeper parts of you. There's many aspects we can look at the self from. And a framework that I really resonate with is the lower and higher self with a conscious observer. So, for example, that seems to manifest when you're making decisions out of alignment with how you'd like to be living life. And if you make consequential ones, that might find you in the lower self state. You're like, I'm not the version of myself I want to be. There's things that I'm doing that I don't really want to be doing, but here I am, which requires self-acceptance. Conversely, if you've been making consequential choices towards the version of yourself that you want to be, you might be experiencing the higher self state where you're like, let's say for me, when I stopped drinking and I had like 6 months not drinking, I felt so in alignment with my best self because I'd made consequential choices along the path of who I wanted to be. I ended up going 2 years without drinking. And then at some point after that, I felt myself slipping back into the lower self. Now, one more framework of thinking about the self that I think holds weight: animal, human, divine. The animalistic aspect of ourself is the one that's drawn to pleasure, short-term gratification, our instinctual drive of, that feels good, I want more of that, indulgence. The divine aspect is that pulling to a higher state of living of, yes, this is what would be good for me in the long term, and this is the experience that I want to bring into my life. And then the human aspect is about covering our base level needs, food, shelter, etc., survival, maybe connection and emotional. So there's many ways to look at the self, and that's just a few ways. But I think they're really helpful to get a bit of an understanding of the aspects that express through us. Now, in the journey of connecting with the self, I believe this is a lifelong journey. And like in many areas of life, it's cyclical and phasic. You can go through a process of being connected and then being less connected. You can experience being more connected with yourself, less connected. But overall, you're probably spiraling towards a deeper connection with self as you go on through life. I've identified 9 different phases that we go through from experiencing to being ourselves. So I might actually do a little bit of a workshop that I'll put in this later, or at least in the Slack community. And I think that could be really insightful to get an understanding of what stage you're at and what might be the block and the path through that. So there's a bit of further reading that can further illustrate the connection with self, what impacts it, how to achieve it. And as always, I'll include some actions and a little bit of a reflective section. And I'll see you tomorrow for the final content drop.